Good morning, everyone. I'm Margaret Hinkle, the Chair of the Commission. Let me call our 50th public meeting to order and ask for a roll call of the commissioners in attendance. Commissioner Bluestone,
Good morning, I'm here.
Commissioner Calderon,
Morning, everyone. I'm here.
Commissioner Ellison,
Good morning, present.
Commissioner Hall,
Good morning, present.
Commissioner Kazarosian,
Morning, everyone, I'm present.
Commissioner Luma,
Good morning, present.
and Commissioner Talley.
Morning, present.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of our April 18th, 2024 meeting?
So moved.
Is there a
I'll
second?
second.
Thank you. Let me ask for a vote on that motion, please. Commissioner Bluestone,
Yes,
Commissioner Calderon,
Yes.
Commissioner Ellison,
Yes.
Commissioner Hall,
Yes.
Commissioner Kazarosian,
Yes.
and Commissioner Talley.
Yes.
I also approve it. It's unanimously carried. Next item, please, our Executive Director report.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, Commissioners. Let me share my screen to go through a few slides of a PowerPoint presentation to go through some of the activities that we've had in the last month since our last meeting. Can everybody see my screen? Yep. Okay, so I will start my report with a certification update, and that is all the activity that we anticipate for the last tranche of certification for officers with last names Q through Z. I will also touch base on the disciplinary records project. Specifically, I'll be talking a little bit about what we call the catch-up project, which I will explain in a few minutes. Lastly, we will close our CFAO, Eric Ravello-Pradas, will give you a quick finance and budget update. As anticipated, we opened up the certification portal on May 1st of this year. The certification team has begun receiving and processing recertification information, which is very encouraging, given that this is prior to the deadline, which is June 30th. This time around, this is the third time we are going through a large batch of recertifications. The process is going very smoothly. Agencies know of the requirements, the process for submitting certifications through the portal is also well known to the agencies. The certification team has made significant improvements to the process that is really using and leveraging the capabilities of the portal, which is very encouraging as well. We also read information from the MPTC in real time and in a systematic way in order to corroborate compliance with the training requirements. I remind commissioners those requirements include the Breach Academy, in-service training, as well as being current with the CPR certificate. So that's one big reason why we anticipate this process to go very smoothly, and even before the timing that it took to complete the other process the year before and the year before that. As the chart in this slide describes, we are expecting our relatively smallest group of officers to be recertified this time around. We now have a much better sense of who we can expect to be recertified, because we have read a lot of that information in real time from the MPTC. And the total is approximately 4,236 officers. As of this past Monday, we have received 805 applications, which represent 19% of the expected group. As was the case in prior years, I will come back to subsequent meetings of the Commission to report back on the Commission's progress made after the deadline of June 30th of 2024. As a reminder, agencies have until June 30th of this year to submit the application for recertification, or they can request 30-day extensions, like our regulations provide for. We don't expect that very many agencies to request extensions. I'll move on to provide a brief update. Oh, I see Commissioner Ellison raised his hand.
Yeah, just a quick question, Enrique. Do we have a breakdown on like the new recruits that have been processed, not current officers, but the recruits since the post? Just curious as to what that number looks like.
Yeah, off the top of my head, that number may be about 1,500
Okay.
total officers. The last time we looked at it, we were also looking at it in terms of those that are A through H and those that are A through C, because we track them separately. But I can come back to a future meeting to break down the new recruits. You know,
And the reason for me flagging that, because I think it's important for the public to know how much other work on top of what the certifications that's also taking place that kind of gets lost. So thank you.
Yeah, that's an important point. One that I can touch on when we get to the item on the agenda, where we will summarize the activities of the subcommittee on certification, which recommends certain things to deal with the fact that we have an ongoing, it's a monthly thing that we have to do when we certify people that graduate from academies. There's an academy every month, really, give or take, and that's something that also keeps us quite busy.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll move on to provide a brief update of the disciplinary records project. Both we have two teams, the standards team and the technology team, who have been very busy since the beginning, really, ensuring information is complete in the portal. For the complaints that were submitted between January 31st of 2023 and March 5th of 2024. This period is significant because commissioners might remember that January 31st of 2023 was the cutoff date for submitting the historical disciplinary records, which we then made public around October of that year. And that process of updating those records has waned down but continues. And the other date is March 5th, when we opened the portal for submission of complaints directly into the portal. So that left this period that we call the catch-up project, because records continue to flow into the general mailbox during that period. But we uploaded a lot of that information into the portal, and we since then needed agencies to come in and review, close out, and update those records as necessary. We have been asking agencies to come to those records to finalize those submissions, and that of course includes uploading information that may be missing, or closing out the disposition or the discipline that may have been imparted on a sustained complaint, if that was the case. So a little bit for reference, approximately 90% of those records from this catch-up project are for incidents that occurred before the end of last year. And that really means for us that those records should be closed out. There's little reason why a complaint should be open for more than 90 days. There are exceptions, and those things do happen, but the majority of these records should be closed out. So we have been reminding agencies of this requirement to make sure that that is the case. Again, that sometimes involves uploading information that is necessary, and we again like to believe that the process is fairly straightforward in interacting with the portal, but we recognize that there is a learning curve when it comes to utilizing that portal. Most recently, we extended for the second time the deadline to update those complaints or records to this last Monday, May 17 of 2024. I will mention here that ensuring compliance with the timing requirements of the portal is really going to be an ongoing effort. We're going to have to be interacting with agencies really on a daily basis in some cases to remind them that of the requirements that are embedded in the portal. Now, I'll say most agencies are responsive and are trying to comply with those deadlines that post imposes, but in some instances, there are still cases that need to be addressed. As of the deadline that we last placed, the May 17 deadline, there are approximately 176 open complaints, of which 69 are past due. That corresponds to about 35 departments with at least one or more complaints. It is fair to say that many of those departments really only have one complaint that's open. So we believe there is not a great burden to come in and interact with the portal and close out the complaints, or again, request an extension if they need to. So we have advised agencies that if they don't complete those requirements or show good cause for not closing those complaints and request an extension, we may publicly report in the aggregate the number of complaints that are pending by agency. Let me pause there and see if there's further questions on the catch-up project before I turn it over to Eric for a finance and administrative update. Seeing none, Eric, do you want to take over
Yes,
this portion?
absolutely. If we could, I don't think I can access. Oh, great. Thank you very much, Enrique. All right. Good morning, everyone. Just a few updates for finance and administration. FY25 budget development. So for next year's budget. So the House wrapped up budget debate at the end of April, and Post maintained its appropriation of $8.75 million. Senate Ways and Means unveiled their version of the budget on May 7th, so just a couple of weeks ago. But the appropriation for Post was actually reduced by $90,000. So 8.75 to 8.66 million. Now, nothing really to be too concerned about, but after following discussions with Chair Hinkle and Treasurer Ellison, it was decided to move forward with taking the initiative and trying to get that funding restored. So we had petitioned Senator Eldridge, who is the chair of Judiciary, to sponsor a restoration amendment for us, which he has done. So the Senate filed 1,100 amendments, and debate started on Monday of this week. We are tracking debate, of course, as usual, tracking the amendments and so forth, but the Senate has not finished yet, and it's unlikely when they are going. We're not exactly sure when they're going to finish. I thought it would be today, but now I'm starting to think it'll be more like possibly Thursday, so tomorrow or Friday, but certainly more to come on that. The next step will be once the Senate engrosses their budget, the conference committee members will be appointed, and that will probably happen sometime next week. For FY24 financial activity, we're rapidly approaching the year end of the fiscal year. As such, we are maintaining our spending forecast of just over $8 million for the entire year. With regard to IT procurements, Cindy's team is making great progress on development of the new website. It's on time and on budget, and almost half of the work has been completed. Owen's team in IT is very close to finalizing details for procuring our Tableau licenses and development support, and we're hoping to get those things wrapped up before June 30th. I just wanted to touch upon internal controls for a little bit. I know this is a rather dry subject, but finally, we recently met with the Commission's Internal Control Working Group to complete our annual review of risk assessments. In addition to 5 members of the staff, the group is comprised of Commissioners Ellison and Luma. The statute requires us to review and update the internal control plan at least once a year, and we have until August 8th to do that. So our team has been collecting feedback and suggesting updates since last summer. We intend to put together a review package for the internal control working group's consideration sometime in July. As we're doing this, we're being ever mindful of the comptroller's brand new process, which begins this year. So the comptroller is replacing the longtime internal control questionnaire with something called the internal control certification. Maintaining the process on an annual basis, the new protocol offers a far more streamlined process for agencies to confirm that they are in compliance and have an active system of internal controls. So work has already begun on this exercise with our team, and we will be collaborating with General Counsel for ultimate approval of the certification by the Executive Director, and that should occur sometime in the last week of June. We have 5 new additions to the commission, spanning 4 of our divisions. The IT division has brought on Sai Ram Kushal Puranam as a data analyst. Alexa Hyde also joined the Division of Police Certification as its 2nd data analyst. The Division of Police Standards has brought on Stephen Ciccioloni as its 3rd intake coordinator, so now we have a total of 4 in that group. For the legal division, Annie Lee has joined the team as counsel, the first of 3 anticipated positions. Most of you will recall Annie is a familiar face as she was formerly an associate with Anderson Krieger. And finally, Michael Bergen will be interning for the legal division this summer. He is currently studying at Suffolk University Law School. We are still reviewing resumes for, so resumes are still ongoing for paralegal, Division of Police Standards Deputy Director, and our 5th Enforcement Counsel. We are just wrapping up reference checks for one of the ongoing counsel positions. So as of today, we have 45 employees, and we are still on par to hit our 48, or number 48, by the end of June 30th. If there are any questions, be happy to entertain. Otherwise, I will turn it back over to Enrique.
Let's see, Commissioner Ellison.
Yeah, just a quick question, Eric and Enrique, does that budget issue affect you onboarding the additional people that you would need, that $90,000 cut that's anticipated right now?
It's a good question. We don't believe so. We do believe that we will still have savings due to delays in hiring. And I hate saying delays in hiring because it makes it look like we're not doing our job, but basically A&F requires us to annualize our budgets, but no one ever starts a job right on July 1st, the first day of the fiscal year. They're always going to get hired several months down the line. We think we'll have enough savings there that if the cut does get sustained, we will be okay.
Thank you.
And to be fair, perhaps that's something that the Senate, even though we were not told about the reason for the cut or the rationale for the cut, I suspect that may have been one of the reasons that they considered. We'll give you an update when the Senate or the conference committee really finishes with their actual amount.
It's always best to go into the conference committee with a number that matches the House and Senate numbers, but if our numbers don't match, then it just means we have to do a little more work on our end to make sure we get the higher number. But like I think I do believe that we'll be okay if it doesn't work, but I think it's important that the conversations with Enrique and Randy and Chair Hinkle and Treasurer Ellison, we figured that it was best to be on record as trying to have those funds restored.
Any other questions from any of the commissioners? If not, Enrique and Eric, thank you and your staffs enormously for those reports and all the hard work that has been put into giving us the information that you just provided us. Moving on next to the legal update, please. Our General Counsel, Randy Ravitz.
Thank you very much. I will share my screen. This is a presentation regarding a matter that has been discussed before the commission, and it's the subject of maintaining, reporting, and auditing, excuse me, of law enforcement records and information. And specifically a set of regulations that would govern that area. Now, just by way of recap, the topic was introduced at the Commission's May 2023 public meeting, and there was a presentation on the general subject. Then at the November 2023 Commission meeting, there was a follow-up presentation discussing the process of developing regulations in this area. The following month, there was a presentation at the Commission's public meeting on a draft set of regulations, and that draft was included in the Commission's meeting packet and thus posted online. And now, in this meeting, there is a revised set of draft regulations that takes into account some input that was received since the last draft was made available. And that draft set of regulations is included in the Commission's packet. Along with that, in the Commission's packet is a copy of the December 2023 PowerPoint presentation that summarizes the regulations as they then appeared, and discusses the general topic and the legal authority for the promulgation of these regulations. And this presentation today focuses on the changes that were made since the December 2023 version, and also provides an example of what an audit might look like and how it could be used. So here are the principal changes made to the draft regulations. They would strengthen the provisions regarding the collection and furnishing of contact information regarding officers and contacts from their collective bargaining units. And the reason for that is that this is a real issue that the Commission has seen, in that it can sometimes be difficult to reach an officer and to ensure that the officer is receiving adequate notice of Commission actions, and therefore a notice of the officer's opportunity to respond and to take action, maybe to line up counsel, maybe to secure representation through their collective bargaining unit. And we want to make sure that that those problems don't arise in the future. So these regulations would strengthen provisions that require officers to provide information to their agencies and the agencies to provide it to the Commission. And then they would also say that once addresses have been furnished, and those addresses are furnished for the purpose of the Commission providing notice to officers, that then when the Commission does provide that notice using that address, it's sufficient for purposes of implementing the Commission's own governing statute and its regulations and policies. These regulations would also require agencies to maintain and provide some very basic information regarding constables serving in their jurisdictions. So who are the constables serving in a particular city? What is the contact information that is available for them? And what are the dates of their service, for example? It would also require more, the regulations would also include more detail about areas that can be analyzed within an audit by the Commission of law enforcement agency records. And that should help make clear the scope of authority that the Commission auditors would have. In fact, there's one provision of the statute that says that the Division of Police Standards shall not be limited in the nature of the audit that it may conduct pursuant to that provision of the statute. And it would also, by providing this additional detail, place agencies on notice of the range of topics that could be analyzed in audits, and therefore make it even more clear the types of records that they need to maintain and the type of reporting that they need to do. These regulations would also provide that the commission could conduct an audit using an outside auditor, or it could direct the agency to line up its own auditor to conduct an internal audit pursuant to commission guidelines. And while the version that was originally provided to the commission in connection with this meeting included a provision at the end, 555 CMR 13.00, that was intended to flesh out exactly which staff units would handle which types of audits. On further consideration, we thought that it's best to leave flexibility in that area, because audits can be complicated. They can cross over different topics, and there might be different considerations that should be taken into account in deciding which staff members are appropriate to handle them. So this set of regulations would leave flexibility in that area. And then it clarifies certain other language. So those are the changes. And I'll now talk about a fictional hypothetical of what an audit could look like. Let's say the Division of Police Standards has reason to believe that a large law enforcement agency is not making reports that it's supposed to make to the commission concerning complaints in one particular area. And those are complaints concerning misconduct by LEA officers toward other LEA employees, but not necessarily involving members of the public. Complaints that allege that type of misconduct are not making their way to the commission as they should be. And the division has reached out to the agency. They've tried to address this, and it still appears to persist. So what happens next? Well, the division would consult with the executive director, decide whether an audit is warranted, and let's say they decide that it is. Then they talk about who's going to handle the audit, and they consider whether to employ external auditors or require the agency to designate to line up their own auditors. But instead, they decide that division members of the Division of Police Standards should conduct the audit. And they identify who would be appropriate, taking into account people's experience, making sure that it's no one with a conflict, making sure that it's someone who's committed to ensuring accuracy and objectivity. And the division then comes up with an initial plan, and they discuss it with the executive director. It's refined, it's approved, and that plan, initial plan, lays out exactly what the objectives will be, how the division will work with collaboratively with the law enforcement agency, what kind of information it'll seek, what the limitations will be on the audit scope. It's not going to look at everything, should be limited to, let's say, a certain time period or a certain number of complaints, or a sample that's selected using a certain method. What kind of report is going to be generated as a result of the audit, and how long is this audit going to take? How long is each stage going to take? So that's the initial plan. And what are the objectives that are included in the plan in this hypothetical? Well, as a general matter, has the agency been neglecting to inform the commission of complaints that are reportable of this type? And if so, how pronounced is this problem? Why is it occurring? And what could be done to address it? And more specifically, first question is, has it been receiving complaints of this type within the time period? And were those complaints, in fact, reportable? Comparing the complaints to the commission's statute and regulations. How were they handled once they were received? Are agency members aware of the commission's requirements regarding investigating and reporting complaints? Is their awareness accurate? Are the requirements being followed? Is there anything going on that's improper, such as some type of effort to suppress certain complaints to make sure that they're not investigated or reported? Is somebody deterred from taking action on these complaints because of retaliation or fear of retaliation? So with those initial objectives defined internally, the division then reaches out to the head of the law enforcement agency, informs that person that there's an intent to conduct an audit, and they set up one or more meetings with the agency head. And what they do is they go over this initial plan, this initial scope, and they solicit input regarding that plan from the agency head, and they make adjustments accordingly based on the feedback that they receive. And some of the things that they discuss are what is necessary to make sure that this audit can be conducted while minimizing the intrusiveness and the burden on the LEA. We don't want to prevent the LEA, the agency, from doing its job because of this audit. Which members will be the points of contact and authorized to make decisions and take actions? What kind of administrative and technical support is available? Can the agency, do they have the ability to lend us an administrative staffer or things like photocopiers and office space, or do they not have those resources? Do we have to make other arrangements? How is the agency structured? How is the record keeping done so that we know how to proceed? What kind of format should the records be provided to us in? Do we need to inform people within their agency about this process? What do we need? What do they need to know? And what do we need to know? And are there any confidentiality issues that we need to be aware of? And do we need to execute some sort of confidentiality agreement that governs those? Obviously, one that's allowed by law. So then once all that is done and the division proceeds to conduct the audit and it obtains records concerning complaints of this type, any policies regarding the submission of complaints, what I'm referring to as internal complaints. So complaints about an officer related to misconduct involving another employee, but not necessarily a member of the public. What kind of training and policies are there regarding the reporting of complaints to the commission? Are there, by any chance, any prior decisions that any authority has issued in this area, or any prior audits of the agency that have been done that's really related to this topic? The division might then interview appropriate personnel, members of internal affairs and human resources, but only after consulting with the head of the agency, making sure that it's done in a way that's appropriate. It might need to call upon members of the agency to make certifications regarding its records. For example, how they're kept, affirming that the copies are true and accurate copies. The division might keep an eye out for other issues that are outside the scope of the audit, but that happen to arise. For example, are these types of complaints being handled differently depending upon who the complaint is against or who's making the complaint? That's outside the scope of the audit, but if the division happens to encounter an issue like that, it might need to refine the scope of the audit. Then any appropriate research regarding applicable law, best practices for law enforcement agencies, best practices and auditing procedures. At the end of all that, here's what the division finds in this hypothetical scenario. It doesn't appear that the agency is deliberately suppressing complaints or that it's not preserving them. It doesn't appear that there's any retaliation or fear of that. But what it does find is some things related to the training that's provided within the agency. And in fact, the agency does a great job of training its internal affairs staff regarding commission reporting requirements. And that staff has really taken in that information, and they're very familiar what to do. But the agency also has this policy that internal complaints regarding one employee against another are submitted to human resources. And human resources is never included in that great training that's done. So the recommendation by the division is to include the HR staff in the same training. Then with respect to complaints being forwarded by HR to internal affairs. The HR staff understands that needs to be done at certain times, but they have a standard for doing so that's too high. It's higher than what's provided for in the commission regulations. So only a small fraction of the complaints are making their way from HR to internal affairs. So the agency is advised to adjust that, to change that standard so that it matches the commission standards. Then the division also finds that a lot of this is impeded because even though the agency has this terrific system for obtaining complaints from members of the public and routing them and sorting them electronically, that system isn't used for internal complaints. So the recommendation is to change that. And then how does this process conclude? Well, the division drafts a report, and it includes all the positive findings, all the things that the agency is doing well, and also the things where there's room to make changes, and an action plan. And the action plan would provide for the agency to take these steps and to file status reports. But before that draft becomes final, it provides it to the agency head. It invites the agency to provide a response. Maybe they think that certain things are unfair, inaccurate. They're invited to cooperate in the development of this action plan. And the division refines the report based on the feedback that it receives. And it reserves the ability to conduct a follow-up audit if necessary. It maintains the confidentiality that was discussed before, and it provides a copy of this report to the mayor or the city council in the city manager, whatever structure they happen to have. The division, based on these findings, doesn't find any disciplinary action to be warranted. These are just some internal processes that could use improvement. And through the process, any unreported complaints have now been reported, so there's no need for an administrative suspension. But the division does provide a warning to the agency that if there's further noncompliance, that there probably will need to be an administrative suspension due to the provisions of Section 9C of our governing statute, which calls for an administrative suspension where someone who's responsible for making reports to the commission doesn't make them, and that administrative suspension lasts until they make the report. What happens next after the audit is concluded? Well, the division receives these status reports. Maybe it conducts a follow-up audit, but that would be abbreviated in nature. And it takes into account what it learned from this experience and the positives that it saw in the law enforcement agency, the negatives that it saw in the law enforcement agency, in developing further policies, further guidance on best practice for law enforcement agencies, again, regarding the positives and the negatives, and refining its own policies and its own auditing procedures going forward. So that's what an audit could look like. That's how it could be used. And hopefully this will help illustrate that this process can provide a vehicle to ensure that agencies across the Commonwealth are adhering to the same best practices, that they learn from each other through the commission, and that the commission uses the audit as a tool to address problems and improve the way that agencies perform. So thank you. With that, I'll take any questions if the chair would like me to.
Anya?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Attorney Ravitz. I sort of tuned into the last kind of point that you were making about the audit as a tool for us as a commission. And I may have missed this in the regulations, but I'm wondering if there's a procedure through which an agency might appeal or object to the timing or the nature of an audit, and also if there's consideration of a way that an agency might appeal procedural aspects or the outcome of an audit.
The regulations, they don't include a provision that's worded in that way. What they do contemplate is that there will be cooperation. So the development of a plan with the agency, but they don't include, let's say, specific provisions regarding an appeal or an ability to challenge the audit. And part of that is because of the provision in Section 8 that that I made reference to, that says with respect to it says the Division of Police Standards may audit all records related to complaints, investigations, and investigative reports of any agency related to complaints of officer misconduct or unprofessionalism, including but not limited to personnel records. And then it says the commission shall promulgate rules and regulations establishing an audit procedure, provided, however, that said rules and regulations shall not limit the ability of the Division of Police Standards to initiate an audit at any time and for any reason. So for that reason, this draft does hold off on giving the ability to prevent an audit from going forward, and instead, builds in these concepts of cooperation that are really best practices in auditing procedures.
And so just to follow up, I mean, what about, in the event that an agency feels that there was, a procedure that seemed unfair or an outcome that seemed unfair, what would be the process an agency could use to, to request reconsideration or to have some sort of, process for expressing their concerns?
Well, the agency could always, all of this is subject to the oversight of not only the executive director, but the commission, the commissioners. And so there'd be no reason why the agency couldn't take its concerns to the executive director and the commissioners.
I'm just wondering if that's something we might want to explicitly state in the regulations themselves, and if there's a strong compelling reason not to, that's fine, but I just seems like that is something that could occur.
Thank you.
If I may, just on that very point, Commissioner, we could certainly include additional language that, for example, might reflect the ability of anybody that's audited to comment specifically or respond to any one of the findings, which is, a good practice in the auditing world. We could be the audit could be provided in draft. There could be a conversation first, and there could be a final report. And at that time, they would also be able to comment on the final report, even after the back and forth that Randy alluded to, the cooperation. So that could definitely, and again, subject to the oversight, they could always appeal any of the findings directly to you all, the commissioners, and all of that could be considered.
Does that respond, Commissioner Bluestone, to your questions?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Ellison?
Yes, Randy, I just had a question. Would you mention the HR? So in smaller agencies that don't have a separate HR, does the statute require them also, if there's a complaint to them for this audit, to report that? I know the Internal Affairs Division does, but how do we capture if someone's reporting to HR, they're not required to report that? How are we getting that information from a separate, like a small town will have an HR that does all of their employees, not separate from the police department. Boston has an HR inside. How do we capture those smaller agencies that someone may be reporting, but that information doesn't get over to?
Right. The example that was given was given because you can see how something like that would happen. And in fact, just recently, somebody reached out to us with a question about that. Really, if there's a complaint of misconduct regarding an officer, there could be forms of misconduct that don't involve members of the public outside the agency, that only involve individuals within the agency, but it still constitutes the type of misconduct that's contemplated by the statute and the regulations. And as long as the complaint and the allegations have the characteristics that are set out in our regulations, then it should be reported to the commission, and there should be follow-up reports, regardless of who initially handled it within the agency or within the municipality. So if that message is not reaching cities and towns, then that's something that then that's a message that we should get out there, that internal misconduct can still be a type of misconduct that needs to come to the post commission. And so if it's complaints along those lines are received by HR as opposed to internal affairs, then the members of HR need to know how to handle it.
Right, that's my concern. You
Yeah.
can see my concern where that they're not required by statute to report as the internal affairs would be. There's a kind of a loophole there for that information getting to the commission.
Right, right. I mean, right now it's complaints that are made to someone within the agency that are addressed by our regulations, and not, our regulations don't address complaints that are made to some body that's outside the law enforcement agency. I see the executive director raised his hand.
Yeah, just on that point, first off, it's a hypothetical, but it's an important illustrative hypothetical, what Randy was outlining. And we've had similar questions in the past, and we've issued general guidance that whenever the agency learns of any kind of misconduct, whenever, and those allegations can come from any source, not just, internal or external, that they're required to submit to us. But it's a good hypothetical in the sense that, there could be a legitimate misunderstanding or whatnot, and one that could be uncovered by our very audits.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Thank you very much for that presentation, Randy, and let me move on then next to item 5 on our agenda. Oh, I'm sorry, Enrique.
Sorry. So, Commissioners and Madam Chair, we were hoping that we could initiate the promulgation process with these regulations, to put them out for public comment and set, what is typically the regular promulgation process, schedule a hearing if the commission was so inclined to vote to move that.
I'm sorry, say that again, please, Enrique.
So we're hoping to begin the formal promulgation process of these regulations, and I believe it requires a vote of the commission to approve these regulations to move them into the formal promulgation process.
Over to you, Randy, on that. Can you be specific exactly what you were asking of the commissioners today?
What we're hoping for is that there could be a vote on this draft set of regulations. Again, that last section that was included in the packet has been struck in what we're proposing now, so that's section 13. But the Commissioner Bluestone raised those ideas, and there's ways that we could handle that. The commission could vote to approve something with the understanding that certain provisions will be added. They could be added during the comment process, so that the initial draft could be put out for public comment, and then we ourselves could, as part of the public comment process, and before they come back to the commission, add the kind of language that Commissioner Bluestone was talking about. So in other words, there are ways to begin the promulgation process while still ensuring that we add the kind of provisions that she was referring to.
Thank you. Is there a motion from the commissioners to that effect?
So moved. Second.
And to be specific, then, a motion to begin the promulgation process along the lines of what was just described by our general counsel. Is that the motion, Commissioner Blue?
Yes.
Okay. Any
That's my
additional questions or comments from the commissioners? If not, let me ask for a vote. Commissioner Calderon,
I'm a yes.
and Commissioner Bluestone is a yes because she's formally part of making the motion. Commissioner Ellison,
Yes.
Commissioner Hall,
Yes.
Commissioner Kesrosen, also part of it is a yes. Commissioner Luma, please.
Yes.
Commissioner Talley,
Yes.
and I'm also affirmative, so that's unanimously carried. Thank you very much. Anything further before we move on to item number 5? Enrique or Randy, anything further?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Then item number 5, which is on our agenda, the Subcommittee on Certification update. And who is going to present that?
I can present that, commissioners, and of course, Commissioner Calderon can add or expound, and Commissioner Bluestone and Kesrosen, who have also been a member of the subcommittee, can add anything to what I have to say. Let me mention that I'll summarize the activities of that subcommittee and report as we always intended. So since the Commission created the Subcommittee on Certification, that subcommittee has met 4 times. That is approximately once per month. As the statute directs us to do, the staff supporting the efforts of this subcommittee have continued to meet with the MPTC to formulate the plan for the next round of certification. At the first meeting, the committee considered statutory and regulatory language. They looked at different alternatives in terms of approach, and subsequently obtained thoughtful comments from different groups and organizations. The comments that we've received in that subcommittee can be broadly summarized as a recognition of 3 broad principles or 3 broad topics. The first one is that the Commission has broad discretion when it comes to the certification requirements of Chapter 6E, and those requirements are ongoing given the language of the statute. There is specific language that says that the Commission shall certify that veteran officers continue to comply with the requirements of the certification. So, secondly, there is a great concern that the formulation of any plan, any new plan, must carefully consider the costs or resources that will be necessary to comply with any requirements for certification or the implementation of such requirements. And third, and finally, there are already efforts being made locally in the areas that are being contemplated. So the recommendations of the subcommittee need to recognize and ultimately leverage, as opposed to duplicate, those local efforts. In many ways, in my opinion, the Commission, through this process, can serve as a major agent for standardizing best practices that may already be out there. So there's been other detailed and insightful comments that the subcommittee will consider when formulating that plan. We also, by the way, the subcommittee heard a good presentation from the legal staff regarding what other jurisdictions are doing specifically when it comes on the topic of physical and psychological wellness. Now, because that recertification is still a work in progress, and because some of these changes may result in the need for modifying regulations, the staff recently recommended, and the subcommittee agreed to adopt those recommendations according to a time frame, the following time frame that I'll explain in a minute. These recommendations are described in a memorandum that was from the Division of Certification to the Subcommittee on Certification. That memorandum was presented at the April meeting of the subcommittee, and is also included in the packet today at the today's commission meeting. So I will just briefly summarize those recommendations. And those are two broad recommendations. The staff recommended and the subcommittee agreed that given time frame, the implementation of any new certification requirements, in other words, any kind of changes that we may do to a questionnaire or et cetera, that they be effective no earlier than June 30th of 2025, which is the expiration of the certification of veteran officers with last names A through H. Now, the mechanism for the staff to do that is to continue recertifying any new graduates in the same manner as everyone else, even if that really means corroborating information that we already know to be the case. This will be the case for officers who began graduating after July 1 of 2021, which were first certified by post. Now, the second recommendation considered and adopted by the subcommittee is that as early as the next round of certification for officers A through H, the division will begin certifying officers for a duration of 3 years, plus the number of months that it will take them to get such expiration to the month of their birth date. This will mean that 3 years after 2025, in other words, beginning in 2028, the certification expiration of those officers will correspond to the month of their birth date. The reason to do this, there's two reasons, I guess. First is to better distribute the workload for agencies and posts throughout the year. And secondly, to have a date that will remind officers of the requirement to be recertified periodically around their birth dates. I guess this is similar to what we all know when we renew our own driver's licenses. Because there are academies graduating every month, new recruits currently obtain a certification duration in accordance with their graduating month. On the other hand, veteran officers will, in the long run, retire and or leave service, and the certification expiration date that I just described earlier in my presentation of A through H, Q through Z, et cetera, will eventually, wind down over time. So with this recommendation, the certification process will get us faster to, frankly, the place that we are already marching towards, which is a distribution of everybody throughout the year. So I will pause here and see if Commissioner Calderon would like to add to this report on what the subcommittee has been considering and the recommendations that were adopted last time around.
No, thank you for the opportunity to weigh in, Mr. Director, but I think that you pretty much summed it up and reviewed it all, what we've done thus far. I'll remind everybody that's on the call that tomorrow morning we do have the next meeting at 10 a.m. at our headquarters on State Street. We'll also be available by Zoom. And just take the opportunity to thank you and everybody involved, obviously the other two committee members, as we're working through this and making progress. So I look forward to seeing everybody tomorrow. And again, thank you for the opportunity to weigh in.
Thank you, Commissioner. Is Commissioner Bluestone or Casarosian, who also are members of the subcommittee, want to weigh in? Hearing none, I was hoping, well, I would mention also that the commission created the subcommittee as in an advisory capacity. So the recent vote that the subcommittee took on implementing the changes no earlier than July 1 of 2025, which is also what the staff recommended, needs to eventually be voted and ratified by the full commission. So if the commissioners are comfortable taking a vote on that matter at this moment, we'll be more than happy to explain it further if needed, or we will need to come back to adopt that vote at a future commission meeting, hopefully no later than the next June meeting.
Mr. Director, I'm comfortable with making that motion if we have a second and then open it up for discussion. But if my fellow commissioners desire to wait, then I'm on board with whatever they want. But I will make the motion.
And specifically, Commissioner Calderon, the motion is,
If I could ask the director to read it again so that we have.
Yeah, to approve and ratify the implementation timeframe described in the memo included in the packet that the subcommittee approved the last month.
And so be it.
thank you. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second that.
Any questions or comments? If not, let me ask for a vote, please. Commissioner Ellison,
Yes.
Commissioner Hall,
Yes.
Commissioner Luma,
Yes.
Commissioner Keserosian,
Yes.
Commissioner Talley.
Yes.
I'm also affirmative, and the other two were the movement and the second. So with that, it's unanimously carried. Those dates are adopted. Anything further with regard to this particular issue, item number 5 on the agenda? If not, there are no matters which were not anticipated by me as chair at the time of posting, and I will then ask for a motion that we go into executive session in accordance with the provisions of the statute, specifically Chapter 30A, Sections 21A1, in anticipation of discussion regarding the discipline or dismissal of complaints or charges brought against a public officer, employer, or an individual. Chapter 38, Section 21A5, in anticipation of discussion regarding the investigation of charges of criminal misconduct, and Chapter 38, Sections 21A7, combined with Chapter 6E, Section 8C2, and to the extent they may be applicable, General Laws, Chapter 6, Sections 168 and 178, in anticipation of discussion regarding the initiation of preliminary inquiries and initial staff review related to the same, and regarding certain criminal offender record information, and also the provisions of the statute regarding the discussion and approval of the minutes of the prior executive session. We are specifically talking about taking up reports of preliminary inquiry in 5 cases, requests for approval to enter into voluntary decertification agreements in 2 cases, and the request for approval to conduct preliminary inquiries with regard to 4 instances, and the approval of the minutes of our April 18th, 2024 executive session. Is there a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Commissioner Bluestone,
Yes.
Mr. Calderon,
Yes.
Mr. Ellison,
Yes.
Mr. Hall,
Yes.
Mr. Keserosian,
Yes.
Mr. Luma.
I'm sorry, just clarity, just approve, yes for the executive session and abstain for the minutes. Did you say, you said approval for the minutes as well, correct?
The minutes of the executive session, which we will take up.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Sorry.
Sorry,
Yes.
I was probably not clear, my fault. Commissioner Talley,
Yes.
I'm also affirmative. And members of the public, we will not reconvene the public portion of this meeting. Enrique, do you wish to explain to the public if they have any questions or comments about anything, how they might communicate with us?
Yes, the same way, just going through our website, our contact information is there. I will take this opportunity to note that we are in the process of updating our website. We will come back next meeting to give you a preview, but our website continues to be the best way to reach us in any way, phone, email, etc.
Thank you. With that, let me also thank all the members of the staff who have put so much effort into the matters that we have taken up today. I know I speak for the other commissioners in expressing my appreciation for that. And commissioners, we will reconvene in approximately 5 minutes. Time to get another cup of coffee, please. Thank you.
Thank you.